Welcome back to Play the Game HQ. I'm Daniel, and in this video, we're going to teach you how to play Solar Gardens, published by Darrington Press, who helped sponsor this video. In Solar Gardens, you'll be drafting tiles and building out a rooftop garden on your player board as you take on the roles of competing garden planners, converting the roof of their skyscrapers into a carbon-neutral and aesthetically pleasing green space. Just gather 2 to 5 players ages 12 and up and get ready to compete to make the most spectacular gardens in 30 to 45 minutes of play. The core of the game is tile laying with a bit of a push-your-luck drafting mechanic. Each round, the starting player will work their way through a stack of tiles, choosing whether to place or pass each one. And when you're past a tile, you'll have the same option, weighing what you know about the tile you've been given against what you don't know about the tiles you haven't seen yet. Because you only get to place one tile per round, and once you decide to place a tile, there's a number of different ways that tile can score as you build out your rooftop garden, from solar panels and wind farms to animal habitats and sculptures. The way each element scores is unique, so it's not just about getting the right things in your garden, it's about how you position them as well. The game ends after 16 total rounds when each player has completely filled their board, and the player with the highest score at the end of the game wins. To set up the game, count out 1 player board per player, making sure to include the one that shows the starting player on the back. Then shuffle the boards and give 1 to each player, and give the starting player token to the person who got the starting player board. Give each player a player aid as well, which shows you the scoring conditions for each of the different elements you'll find on the tiles. Shuffle all of the tiles and stack them face down in the middle of the table, and it's fine if there's a few different stacks. You can set the scoring pad to the side for now. All of the scoring is done at the end of the game, so you won't need that until the game is over. At the beginning of each round, the starting player will draw 1 more tile than there are players, so we're set up for a 3-player game, which means I'll draw 4 tiles. But don't look at those tiles yet. Keep them in a face-down stack, then one at a time, draw a tile and put it face up where everyone can see it. The starting player then gets to choose whether they want to keep this tile or pass it to the next player, and you have to make this decision before you look at the next tile in the stack. If you decide to pass it, give it to the player on your left, and then they have the same choice, play it or pass it to the next player, until it gets all the way to the last player. The last player in line can choose to pass on the tile and just put it in the discard pile, but the last player can only pass 1 time per round. If you're the last player and you've already discarded a tile this round, you must play the next tile that comes to you. Every player has to play exactly 1 tile per round, so as you receive each tile, you have to decide if you want to keep it without knowing what else is coming this round. Once you decide to keep a tile, you're out for the rest of the round, so when tiles are being passed, they'll just skip over you. If you're the starting player, you still only get to place 1 tile, but even after you decide to keep a tile, you are still responsible for flipping the tiles and passing them to the next player. If you haven't taken a tile yet and the last tile in the stack is given to you, you must keep that tile. Everyone has to play a tile every round no matter what. Once a tile finds a home, whether that's with another player or in the discard pile, the starting player will flip another tile from that stack that they made at the beginning of the round and repeat this process until all of those tiles have been claimed. There will always be 1 more tile per round than there are players, so 1 will always end up in the discard pile. If that's the last tile in the stack, you can just discard it without passing it around the table. When you decide to keep a tile, place it face up on any empty space anywhere on your board. There's no restrictions on placement. You can place your tile in any empty space on your board, no matter what you've already placed. You can rotate it any way you want, but each space can only hold 1 tile, and once a tile is placed, it can't be moved for any reason. But even though you can put your tile anywhere, you want to be strategic to maximize your points. There's 6 different elements that all score differently, and each tile contains some mix of those elements. So you'll want to make sure that you're placing tiles in a way that scores you the most points while also keeping options open for the future tiles. And we'll talk about how each of those elements works in just a minute when we get to scoring. Once everyone has placed their tiles, pass the starting player token 1 player to the left, and that player will start the next round. And this continues until everyone has filled their boards, which happens after 16 rounds. If you want the game to move a bit quicker, then as soon as the starting player passes their tile to the next player, they can draw the next tile from the pile instead of waiting to see who keeps the current tile. But if you do that, be sure to wait until the next player has decided whether or not to keep the current tile before you pass them a new one. After 16 rounds, once everyone has filled their boards, the game ends and it's time to score. Each different element on your board contributes something different to the overall aesthetic and function of the rooftop garden, and each one of those elements scores in its own unique way. This icon here represents victory points, so when you see that icon either on the tiles, around the board, or in the rulebook, just know that that means victory points. Now let's look at all of the different ways to score, and we'll start with wind turbines. Wind turbines are shown on tiles in groups. Each of these groups counts as 1 turbine for the purpose of scoring. So this tile has 2 turbines when it comes time to score. Turbines score by having at least 4 groups in a row of tiles. Each row tells you how many points it scores by having at least 4 turbines in that row. So this row will score 1 point for having 4 turbines anywhere in this row. This row scores 2 points, 3 points, and the top row scores 4 points for having 4 groups of wind turbines in that row. And having more than 4 doesn't score you any extra points. 1, 2, 3, and 4 points is the maximum that you can score on each of those rows, and each row scores separately. So if you only have 4 turbines in the top row, you would still score 4 points for that, even if you don't have enough to score any of the other rows. So currently I would score 4 points for this row and 3 points for this row and no points for the bottom 2 rows because I don't have 4 groups of wind turbines in either of those rows. Solar panels score the same way but for vertical columns. So if you have 4 solar panels in the left column, you'll score 1 point all the way to 4 points for having 4 solar panels in the right column. And just like wind turbines, having more than 4 doesn't score you any extra points. These decorative elements that you see on different tiles are animal habitats. There's 5 different kinds that are all shown on your player aid. And animal habitats score for each pair of adjacent matching habitats and for full sets of habitats across your entire board. First, each pair of adjacent matching habitats scores 3 points, and the same habitat can score multiple times if it's adjacent to multiple matching habitats, but only orthogonally. Habitats do not score diagonally. So this habitat will score twice because it's adjacent to this habitat and this habitat. These 2 won't score anything because they're diagonal, and these 2 will score 3 points for being adjacent. If you're able to make a full set of all 5 habitats across your entire garden, regardless of whether they're adjacent or not, you'll score 5 points for each complete set. Pathways are these long brown walkway portions that weave their way through your garden. At the end of the game, find the path that incorporates the most tiles on your board and score 1 point for each tile in that path. Paths can fork and go in different directions, so you're looking for the longest connected path that uses the most tiles. On my board, that would be this section here that uses 6 tiles and would therefore be worth 6 points. Then compare your biggest path with all of the other players at the table, and whoever has the largest overall path scores an additional 3 points. And ties are friendly, so if there is a tie for largest path, all of the tied players score 3 points. Any paths in your garden, like these 2 that aren't connected to your largest path, are ignored for scoring. Next, we have flower beds. These are shown as rows of flower on your board, and they come in all kinds of different shapes. You can make larger flower beds by placing the tiles so the edges match up with no gaps. So this entire area is one single flower bed. Some flower beds have white fencing around the edge, and that's used to enclose the flower bed. You don't have to enclose flower beds, but you will score more if you do. And for scoring, the entire outside edge of the board is considered fencing. You'll also see these water filters on some of your flower bed tiles. A flower bed has to have at least 1 water filter to score, and it will score double if it has 2 or more. Flower beds with 1 water filter score 1 point per tile if they're fully enclosed, meaning they have white fencing around the entire perimeter of the flower bed. And they score 2 points per tile if they have 2 or more water filters. And having more than 2 water filters doesn't score any extra points. The most you can score for a flower bed is 2 points per tile. If your flower bed is not fully enclosed, meaning it has at least 1 open edge without fencing around it, like this one right here, it scores half the points it normally would rounded down. So this flower bed that has 1 tile and 1 water filter and is not fully enclosed would score 0 points because that's half a point rounded down. And remember, if a flower bed has 0 water filters like this one, it scores 0 points regardless of how big it is. And finally, we have sculptures, which look like our victory point symbol. Each individual sculpture on your board counts for 1 point, even when they're in clusters. So this single sculpture is worth 1 point, and this cluster of 2 sculptures is worth 2 points. Once you've scored each of the elements in your rooftop garden and recorded that on the included score pad, add up all of your points and the player with the highest score at the end of the game wins. And that is Solar Gardens. You can learn more about this game at darringtonpress.com/solargardens, and if you have any questions, be sure to leave us a comment below and we will answer as quick as we can. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.